Let me introduce myself. For those who don't know me, I'm John Mullen. I live on 34 Shore Drive, and my colleague here, Randy Barnes, he lives. Speak up. Is that better? Okay. So Randy lives on Fox Road, and I certainly appreciate you all coming here. Why did we do this? Well, Randy is the invasive species coordinator. What is that? He takes care of all the milfoil that we have lately. He manages that for the Conservation Commission. And I do the VLAP. What's VLAP? VLAP is your water testing, where we test the lake for water quality, phosphorus, nitrogen, all that kind of good stuff. But the reason we're having this meeting is, and I understand there's a couple associations that have picnics today, and we didn't clear that. We wanted to get this meeting as quick as possible because in the last month or so, there's been a lot of concern, particularly about the cyanobacteria outbreaks, the cyano blooms, particularly on the north part of the lake, Pinkham, down by Lakelands, down by Lake Shore, and so forth and so on. So a lot of people have expressed what's going on. We don't know anything. Who do we call? What do we do? We don't know what to do. Blah 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 blah. So then we decided maybe this is a time to put forth an informational meeting on what we get involved with and try to explain basically what cyano is, how it works, maybe how to fix it. So let me introduce a couple of guests here. We have the Conservation Commission here. Carol Vitas, Chairman, Kate Bizard, and our main guest speaker today is Lisa Marks from DES. We have our selectmen here. We have one, two, three. Two of them are back trying to fix the water. We used the spigot back there this morning to fill the coffee pot, and the valves blew out. So we had them kind of trickled, and my wife Jill over here was in the bucket brigade every 5 minutes trying to hit it. So now is the water off? It's off, but I will turn it on as needed. Okay. So the chairman of the board, Roxanne Keegan over there, will be the water turner on or offer if you have to use the bathroom. So we have an hour filled of presentations, and we don't want to bore you, but we think the information we have will be helpful. And then Lisa will do her presentation, which is about a half an hour, and then about 11 o'clock or so, we'll have a Q&A. And our main purpose here is to give as much information as we can. We don't have all the answers, but we can start a conversation, and we're all concerned, that's why you're here, concerned by the lake and its quality and its impact on our life, the impact on the town. We have another official here. We have Carl Roy as our health officer. We also have Dan Phillips, our highway road agent. He's back here trying to fix things. So, Randy, you want to say a few words quickly? And then you can just go into it. Well, do you want to add anything that I've talked about?
Just thank you all for showing up. We appreciate the great turnout. I know there's been a lot of questions about what's happening on the lake, especially with the cyanobacteria outbreaks that we've had. I've actually noticed a lot less activity on the lake, I think because of the outbreaks. I think people are unsure what you can and cannot do. And so we'll have a chance to talk about that a little bit today as well.
Okay. Lisa, do you want me to hit the button and move forward for his? Okay, so just up or down, right?
I think it's left right.
Left, right, okay. Okay, there we go. Okay.
So, milfoil. The Department of Environmental Services has a program that they sponsor each year to help towns and communities deal with milfoil. Sorry, I'll try to get a little bit closer. So they have a grant program that for all the towns that apply for it, it determines how much money is available and divvied up among the communities who have their grants approved. In 2023, we were approved for just over $2,500 in milfoil extraction. So of that, the town is responsible for about 50% of it. So a little over $1,200 is what we have to pay for, and then the town will pay for the rest of it, or the state. What they do is we get an approved list of divers. So I put out bids to 5 different dive companies this year, and of those, I think we got 3 bids back. Amy Smagula at DES reviews all the bids, and she selects who is the successful bidder for each town and community. And then I coordinate with the divers to come in. But before any of that happens, they send a biologist out, and in June of this year, the biologist came out and they identified where the red dots are, the different hot spots around the lake where they were able to visually see the milfoil. Now, we know that there's more than that as well. They're not able to spot everything, but they spot quite a bit, and especially the larger colonies. So when the divers, and if we go to the next slide, please. When the divers come in, they'll focus on those hot spots, and as you can see, what they do is they hand harvest. And so he's under there, and he's pulling up the root ball. They don't want to just pull the plant. They want to get the full root ball. And we've ended up with 2 dives so far this year, July 11th and July 23rd. And altogether, we have over 51 gallons that we've harvested. All of last year, in 6 dives, they harvested 61 gallons. So we're on a track to probably double what we did last year, which is not a good sign. But this particular dive crew, I think they're being very, very proficient. They're being very cognizant of what they're doing. They're trying to make sure that they get the full plant out. We have 4 additional dives. They were originally scheduled to come back today, but with the threat of rain, what they did, they contacted me this morning. They're not going to come back off your beach, and then I would, toss it in the woods, or certainly away from the lake. We have steadily seen an increase since 2019 in the amount of milfoil that's extracted, and I think this year obviously is not going to be any exception. So we really need everyone to be very diligent about, number one, if see someone putting a boat in the water and they've got plant material hanging from it, we should all be able to challenge them and say, hey, let's make sure we get this cleaned off before you put it in the water. That's how it gets introduced. Number 2, if you happen to see plants growing, even if you're not sure if it's milfoil or not, it's better to ask the question, take a picture of it. Myself, John, we can send it to the state. We can come over and take a look at it. And if it is milfoil, we'll work to get it extracted. I also had to include a picture from our diver's prop, because I know a lot of us can relate to this. Unfortunately, he hit a couple of rocks and pretty much disabled his prop, so that he was actually going to be coming back on the 24th, but that prevented him from doing it. So, but again, let's all just be very diligent about milfoil, and hopefully we can get a good handle on it and continue to control it. And John, I will hand it back over to you.
Okay. Now, just so everybody understands, we do work under the guise of the Conservation Commission, because when we sign our letters, most of the time, our memos, it's from Conservation Commission, Middleton Conservation Commission. So my responsibility has been for a long time, has been VLAP. VLAP is a state program called the Volunteer Lake Assessment Program, and basically it's a water testing type of program throughout New Hampshire, throughout all their lakes. Sunrise Lake has been doing it since 1997. So what do? we have certain points around the lake that we go periodically, and for the longest time, since 97, or a long time, we've only been testing once a year. And to get a better feel, an understanding of the health of the lake or its character in terms of water quality, it's really recommended you do it 3 times, spring, summer, and fall. So this year we're doing another one the middle of August, and I'm going to try to arrange a third one because we have a budget for it. So we'll do it sometime in October before we have to pull our boats in. So what do? We go around to, right now there are 10 specific spots. Some are at, they're at the Tanglewood Brook off of Lake Shore. We do Lake Shore Lands Beach. We do Pinkham Cove. We do the Tanglewood Brook. We actually do the Pinkham Brook, which is off Pinkham. We can test, and we have tested in the past, the Hampshire Shores Beach. We go down and test the town beach, and we don't test for E. coli automatically. Now we do that at the request of the health officer, whether we do that. Now I can tell you our E. coli levels lately have been under state standards, so we're okay. And we have, last year we tested all 3 beaches that are used, the Lake Shore Lands Beach, Town Beach, and Hampshire Shore Beach, and they're all well below the criteria the state gets nervous about. So we test for a variety of chemicals, phosphorus, we look at the clarity of the water, we look at the temperature of the water, we go out on a boat, lately it's been my pontoon boat. We have not been able to get to all sites because my boat can't get in certain places when we're going around because it's too shallow and rocky. But I'm going to try to get that better. In terms of where do we test the water, another place we test is about, maybe 100 yards off the dam, kind of south a little bit, because that's kind of the deep point of the lake. And we check temperature, we check water clarity, we look down a Saatchi disc, which is about like this. It looks like a black and white checkered, and you look at it, and further it goes down so you can't see it anymore. And that determines clarity. We note the clarity of the water. We note looking at the water. The water is kind of a T shape or T color. That's because of the vegetation that's in the lake. So we do water testing, 10 sites once a year. Now it's going to be 2 or 3 times a year. The results of those tests, and Anissa was nice enough to bring a hard copy of the results for 2022. They're published at the end of the year of a full analysis of what the results are. And you can pick that up and read those. They are online. You can get them also, but we try to put them online here. And they tell you what we tested, what we found, and then where do we fit in the parameters that are set by the state: good, medium, poor, and bad. So over the years, and I'm sure we're not the only lake, but that's no excuse. I don't worry about that. I worry about this lake here. The water quality has diminished. The phosphorus has grown. Phosphorus is a big contributor to nutrients. It's not the only one, but it's a big contributor to nutrients. That has caused, I'm pretty sure that's what's called our cyanobacteria outbreak. And so in 2018, the state did a study. They do an annual study report card of the lakes, and we were given a poor rating. Over the years, so Randy and myself and all of you, I'm sure, want to make sure we try to get that up. Not going to be done overnight, folks. It's going to take some work and some time, but I think we can do it. All right, you want to hit the next one? Okay, these are the spots, and You can see this is down by the town beach. I got to bring my little thing here. Sunrise, Hampshire Shores, Beach 2 of Sunrise Lake Estates, Beach 1. This is the deep spot. They don't have it here, but that's where the beach is. This is where a lot of milfoil was taken out. Everybody know where this is? Dowling, that deep cove there that nobody goes. I mean, it's like dead water. Took a lot out of there, right? I think he did. So we go over here. Here's the Tanglewood Brook. Here's the Hampshire Brook. And there's a lot of other water that comes in besides those. Those are the 2 feeder brooks. There's a lot of water that comes in during rain events through culverts. One is at Lake Lands Beach. There's another one at Pinkham Cove. I never even knew the thing was there until I went there on a rainy day, and holy cow. So these run, this runs pretty heavy during a heavy rain event. But in the summer, nothing. So you want to hit the next slide? This is the front page. I'm sorry it doesn't look so good, but there's hard copies over there on our table that you can take a look at. And this is what comes out at the end of the year, and it shows where your water quality is from 97 all the way to current. I believe this is the phosphorus, and I'm sorry this is so poor. But you can see our conductivity, which is an influence on cyanobacteria in conjunction with phosphorus, has gone up. Our phosphorus has kind of gone down, then spiked after spiked one year where we didn't do a test, then it dropped dramatically. Did we do anything? I don't think so. Just could be testing too. Could be testing. But then it and now it's creeped up. It's creeped up. We're not the only lake, but again, not where we do better. Okay, next. This is this over here, and again, this is poor. Sorry for the quality of the picture, but that is the initial. That's what we get after about 2 weeks after we submit the test to the state for analysis, and they come back with that with the bill. That's why we get that. And then that previous document is the one that's the final report for. Am I not speaking loud enough? Oh, sorry.
Turning away from the microphone.
So. Okay, stay away from the microphone.
No, you're turning away from it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. This here, I did a quick analysis of our phosphorus load for the last 10 years, and it's funny. We've had a lot of cyno this year, and this is 2022, and this was the test that we did in June, and they all went down except the Lakeshore Beach went down in phosphorus. With all that rain and stuff, I don't know why, other than their culvert and drainage. What do you call that? I don't want to. I don't know. You want to call it a ditch? I guess you call it a ditch. Really flows into the lake, and that was where the first cyno advisory was posted on the test on the water that was tested there. All right, you want to switch? Okay, switch again. All right, cyanobacteria. Boy, it just showed up. No. These are pictures of this is my beach in 2014. That's my beach again. That's a pretty big bloom. What did I do about that? Nothing. My neighbor came over with his watercraft. I didn't know who to call, didn't know about it, thought it was just okay. 2019. 2023, that's down by Lakeland Shore. That was in late June, or 1st of June. That was the first report. This was in July. People know where that is, right? They recognize that, right? That's Lakeland That's the bloom. And this is near the end of their ramp. And I'm not picking on the beach per se, I'm just showing this. So the bloom was here, and it kind of, water came down that way. Okay. So we certainly have a lot of information over there on our VLAP. One thing I do want to, I have signs over there. When we go out on the water, I put on my pontoon boat, you see there a little white sign so everybody knows that because sometimes we pull up close to the beach and I know people, what are you doing getting so close to the beach? And we're very careful if there's swimmers in there. We don't want to run over them or anything. So, but it's kind of a sign saying we're coming. We also, I have put together some signs for the associations to put up on what to look for Sino. I have over there also, what else do I have? And Nisa brought some other documents. Please take those. One thing I do want to mention is today, all that we're talking about and what's wrong with the lake has been put forth in the Sunrise Lake Watershed Management Plan. That was done in 2021. Actually signed off in 2022. There's a copy of this on our watershed thing here, and I wrote a summary of what's in the book. But this whole report, some 60, 70 pages long, is now on the website. I thought it was on the website, but it was not, so I had to publish. But it was readily available in Stratford Regional Planning. They're the ones that helped us. They're the ones that actually did it with the help of DES, putting that plan together. And that took about a year and a half. And so I do want you to note on the watershed that Randy and I think some of us need to think about just not the lake itself, but the whole watershed and how that affects the lake itself. And we have some maps over here showing where the watershed, and keep in mind that the watershed, the Sunrise Lake District, or Sunrise Lake watershed is not just in Middleton. And it doesn't affect just Middleton. It goes up into New Durham. It's part of a larger state watershed, which is the Patasquah watershed. Our dam flows out, our water flows out through the dam, down the hill, hits the Cocheco River. Cocheco River heads toward Dover, empties into the Cocheco River, Patasquah, and goes to the Great Bay and then out to the ocean. So whatever we do or whatever we don't do, and we're not the only one. Merry Meeting is the same way. Merry Meeting dumps in and flows out. Everything in the state flows downhill, I think, pretty much. So when we think of the watershed, I think we need to look at the whole, because the whole will affect our little lake here, plus downstream. So with that being said, and we're going to take questions later, but go ahead.
I'm likely to forget my question.
Okay.
How many years has this VLAP program been measuring these locations around the lake?
I don't know how long. Since 97. So, and in this lake it's been measured since 97.
So you have the data since 1997 for each location, so you can map that versus time.
That's, yeah.
See if any location is a particular problem.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, that is correct. So we can, his question was how many locations and how long has the state been doing it? Since 1997. Same thing with our lake. We have maps that show where these locations are, plus all the data is reported on those annual reports that are copies of it over there, and it'll show you all the results that we test under certain parameters. We don't test for everything. We don't test for nitrogen, I don't think. We probably should, but we don't.
Well, the reason why I ask is that if there's a trend in any particular location, it might help you isolate something that's
Sure.
a particular problem.
Absolutely, absolutely. Those graphs will show an overall trend of the various parameters that we use. And you can look at that data and say, okay, like for example, I explained that the phosphorus increase over last year was only at 1 point. Now, there's variables in that. How well do we test? How far do we get to the test site? Do we get to the same precise test site every time? No. We're not professionals, although we have professional interns with us that should know.
That's also part of what was looked at in that 2021 watershed plan. The watershed plan, I have a little.
Oh yeah,
quick
you do,
mic.
okay.
Well, I'll stand up. That 2021 watershed plan considered VLAP data as one of several data sources and does get very site specific and says you've got this many pounds of phosphorus associated with land use at Jones Beach, right? It's very site specific. So, yeah.
So that plan is kind of our guide to what things are, what we would like to do, and how do we go about it. And the summary is a summary, but I encourage you to go on, at least, let me put it this way. I asked the town to put it on Thursday. Whether she got to do it or not, I don't know. I'm sure it won't be on for another week because she's on vacation. But if you go to Stratford Regional Planning and go through the pages to get to Middleton, there's a lot of document maps, but in there is the the Middleton Sunrise Lake Watershed Management Plan. If you Google that, it'll pop up also. So, question? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Now, before you go, the reason we're doing this.
John, have them come and stand up here.
Okay. The reason we're doing this is our video audience that watches this afterwards on YouTube and live. We have not been able to hear the audience. When we have a Board of Selectmen here, we can always hear the Board of Selectmen, always. But we can't hear the audience. So,
Okay.
So go ahead, question.
I want to identify myself with Paul Miller, Six Shore Drive, so that people know where I'm from. All right, because I do that in my own association. Where does phosphorus come from? Is it a natural occurring phosphorus or from a byproduct of something?
Okay.
I'm going to talk extensively about that.
She's going to talk about that. So,
Yes.
if you have specific technical questions and chemical questions, Nisa is going to be able to answer those for you, and she is going to come up next. So, let me introduce. Are you ready to put your little thumb drive in it? Nisa Marks is the watershed. Is that what you are?
Yep.
Watershed coordinator for New Hampshire DES, and she's for Rivers and Lakes Management Program, Protection Program, is that correct? And she has been very helpful with me when I've interfaced with DES in terms of getting information, advice. She coordinates through a lot of idiosyncrasies in the water department, so she's very helpful. So it's all yours, Nisa.
Thank you, John. And there are so many programs at DES that really do depend on our local volunteers. So it's been wonderful to have John and Randy and Sunrise Lake's participation in VLAP. You know, that data is both very helpful to lake associations at the local level, conservation commissions work at the local level. It's also really helpful to us aggregated across all the lakes in the state to have a sense of water quality trends in the state as a whole. So thanks to our local volunteers. As John mentioned, I'm the watershed coordinator. So my role at DES is to be a general point of contact for lake associations across New Hampshire. I work on a whole range of water quality issues, including cyanobacteria, and including lake management issues, sort of the what do we do about it side of things. And that's what I'm going to focus on today is, all right, we've got these blooms. How do we identify and report them, know the risks associated with them, when is it safe to swim, and so forth. And then, now that they're here, what do we do about them? What can the local community do about them? What is the state doing about them? So that'll be my focus. So cyanobacteria are kind of a fascinating group of organisms. They are native species. So this is a different issue than something like milfoil, which was introduced. However, under just the right conditions, their growth takes off and they come to dominate the lake and they start producing toxins at a level that can be harmful to human health. Some people know them as blue-green algae. That's the same thing. Cyanobacteria and blue-green algae, they are not actually algae, they're a bacteria, which is why we've moved to calling them cyanobacteria. They're very old, they're all over the globe, they're incredibly diverse, and they're not all bad. We have an oxygenated atmosphere here on Earth because of cyanobacteria. So we can have at least one thing to be grateful to them for. However, they do produce cyanotoxins, and this is the dominant reason why we're concerned about them at the state level and at the local level. Exposure to cyanotoxins has a whole range of health effects, some acute and some chronic, and they range from just mild skin irritation all the way through to death. So it can be a serious public health risk. They are particularly dangerous to dogs as well. We do nationally and in New Hampshire see dog deaths resulting from cyanobacteria blooms. So if you see something unusual in the water, when in doubt, stay out, is what we advise, because there can be serious health side effects when bloom conditions are happening, so when they have sort of come to be that dominant thing in the lake and are visible. So lots of good reasons to prevent blooms. It is easier to prevent blooms than it is to manage blooms. As I mentioned, they threaten public health. They impede recreation, especially at the times of year when we all want to be out jumping in the lake because it's hot outside. They are harmful to wildlife, and we see fish kills associated with cyanobacteria blooms from time to time. They also are associated with decreases in property values. So up to 33% decline in property values has been documented on lakes with chronic cyanobacteria blooms. That's a little bit of an outlier, but it is consistent to see somewhere around a 10% decline in property values. So protecting water quality protects your investment in addition to protecting public health and the reasons that draw us to our lakes. So I'm going to go through sort of 4 categories of things. It's going to be a lot of information here, but we will have sort of extended Q&A, and I'm happy to stick around as long as you want afterwards as well to be available for additional specific questions. I'll talk about how to identify and report blooms. Then I'll go through root causes of blooms, and we'll get into specifics about phosphorus. Then we'll talk about things that the lake community can do, lake stakeholders can do, and some specific resources for individual homeowners as well who are interested in taking action. So show of hands, how many folks here would be comfortable knowing a cyanobacteria bloom if they saw one? That's pretty good. Awesome. I won't dwell too long on this then, but they do have a diversity of appearances here in New Hampshire. All of them look weird. So we see teal, we see blue, we see green, we see red, we see purple. It can be all different kinds of colors, white. They're very dynamic. Cyanobacteria blooms can move around a lake in a matter of hours. They can move from the deep spot of the lake to a shoreline. They move with wind. They move with current, wakes and currents, which is why when we issue an advisory for public health, we do a lake-wide advisory because these blooms are so fast-moving. And they vary in how long they last. New this year, we have an online reporting form. If you see a bloom or what you think may be a bloom, please report it. We will get back to you promptly with confirmation of if it's a bloom or not. We'll let you know if we need a sample, or we'll come out and take a sample. This is really helpful for us at the statewide level as we're trying to track, are these blooms increasing in New Hampshire, for example? So it's very helpful data for us in addition to being protective of public health, so we can help get the word out to any of the lake users if there is a bloom. So that's the link. That link will also be on the closing slide with contact information. It's a very easy form. I've reported blooms myself through it. It only takes a few minutes. You'll put in, basics like location, what the bloom looks like. You can upload a photo right to the reporting form. What we've heard from people is that it is now much easier to report a bloom than it has been in previous years with the use of this online form. And it also makes our response time to it faster because we don't have to be going back and forth with people to get all of the information we need in order to go out and take a sample, for example. The bottom line here again, when in doubt, stay out. If you're not sure if it's a bloom or not, go ahead and report it. We'll get back to you promptly. It's, generally speaking, not worth the risk. If you want to check where in New Hampshire there are active advisories, and Sunrise Lake, or that could be on any other lake in New Hampshire, we have what's called the Healthy Swimming Map. You can find it by just Googling New Hampshire Healthy Swimming Map. It is a map and a list of all of the active advisories in the state. This includes both cyanobacteria blooms and E. coli outbreaks on state beaches. Any active bloom will be shown with a red square, and if it's clear, it'll have green. A few things on this mapper: you can search by location as well, so you can type in, Sunrise Lake, Middleton, and it'll zoom into your water body. If there are no active cyanobacteria alerts, it will tell you no current alerts. Otherwise, it'll be in a list down below of all of them statewide. If you zoom into a specific water body, if the water body is red, there's an active advisory or warning. If it's blue, there is no active warning. Again, we've updated this year to be a lot more user-friendly, so now it includes, is there an active advisory or not? What species are present? What do they look like? Have there been other blooms this summer? And it includes this picture of the bloom. This is one of the advantages of that new reporting form, is we can take that photo and make it available to people so they can see this is what it looked like yesterday here at this site. So again, that's the Healthy Swimming Mapper for New Hampshire. All right, so shifting gears a little bit, the rest of this is going to talk about sort of root causes of blooms, what we can do about it, and how it connects to that watershed management plan that John mentioned. All right, so this is a little bit oversimplified, but it is generally true that when you have these conditions in this combination, you get a bloom. So they require sunlight. Cyanobacteria do photosynthesis, so they require access to sunlight. They require excess nutrients, usually phosphorus, although nitrogen also plays a role, and warm water temperatures. When we think, and if you have those three in the right combination, you got a bloom. When you think about which one of those three is under our control, it's this one. It's the nutrients. So phosphorus levels in Sunrise Lake today are about 4 times the natural level of phosphorus in the lake. And that's enough to be contributing to really increase the likelihood of blooms. So I'm going to focus on this nutrients piece for most of the rest of this talk. And this is why. It's because it's the root cause that's under our control. So when we think about where phosphorus comes from, we really can't divorce what's going on in the lake from what's going on in the watershed as a whole. There are natural sources of phosphorus. However, the vast majority of phosphorus that's in the lake comes from human activities. So fertilizer is one big component. We put fertilizer onto our properties in order to make plants grow. It rains, that fertilizer runs off, it ends up in the lake where it makes plants grow. So that phosphorus is fueling weed growth and cyanobacteria growth. The other thing of where phosphorus comes from is it's a reflection of our development and our land use. So if we think about New Hampshire 200 years ago, it was all forested. Rainwater would come down. We had trees with big, deep roots that would hold that rainwater in place, essentially, and slow down the movement of water through the landscape. This holds soil in place, which holds nutrients in place. Today we have a lot of impermeable surfaces. So this is everything from our roads, our roofs, our driveways, parking lots. It varies, our development, right? And what happens, I'm sure you've all seen it in a bigger parking lot, for example. The water comes down, it hits that surface where it can't infiltrate, it runs across it, it gathers speed. By the time it hits the sides of the roads, it's got enough speed that it's starting to wash the soil away, carry that soil with it. That soil has nutrients in it. That stormwater ends up in our rivers and our lakes, where those nutrients then become available for weed growth, cyanobacteria growth. We also think about, for example, lawns, have very shallow root systems compared to native plants, not just trees, but even native plants like, blueberries or something. And so again, it's harder to hold the water in place, and those nutrients end up in our lakes. So to reduce the likelihood of cyanobacteria blooms in Sunrise Lake, we estimate that we would need about a 20% reduction in phosphorus inputs from the landscape into Sunrise Lake. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. If we did that 20%, if we accomplished that 20% reduction in phosphorus input, we would manage to take the number of days with cyanobacteria blooms down from about 10 or 11, which is where you are now, to probably about 2. So that's the goal of that watershed plan that John had talked about. And I'll come back to that a little bit later, too. All right, so what can we do? What does this mean at like an actual practical sort of specific level? I'm going to go through 6 things that stakeholders can do. And then at the end, I'll relate those as well to things individual homeowners can do. So number 1, improve stormwater management. Statewide, we see that stormwater contributes to over 90% of water quality issues in the state of New Hampshire. This is the big one in our state. What stormwater management looks like at a site-specific level varies from place to place. These are just some examples. Basically, you're thinking about taking that water away from the lake, slowing it down, holding it in place, preventing erosion. So it could be changing road grading. Instead of having a dirt road graded towards the lake, have the dirt road graded away from the lake, and that water would end up in a vegetated ditch that can help hold the water in place. Could be fixing culverts. We're seeing culverts that are blowing out more frequently. Let's install properly sized culverts and have the water directed into a vegetated area to slow down the water. It could be things like revegetating shorelines or making sure that the sides of boat ramps aren't washed out, things like this. At Sunrise Lake, the watershed management plan identified that there are 2 priority sites around stormwater management, the Hampshire Shores boat launch and Jones Beach. There were several other sites identified as well, but those were the 2 biggest in terms of the amount of phosphorus that's coming from erosion and stormwater issues. All right, second thing we can do, protect our shorelands. Shorelands are kind of our last line of defense, right? So this water's coming off the landscape. If it hits, bare soil 50 feet from the water, you've got no defense. Whereas if it hits, conserved land that's forested, for example, you've got your last line of defense in place. So this is this picture, with a clear-cut slope. When it rains, that slope is just washing directly into the lake. There are ways to have a vegetated shoreline and still have things like your viewscape and a nice place to sit by the lake. I heard from someone who recently decided to take out their lawn and put in native blueberries. And they are so excited because their grandkids are out picking blueberries for the first year this year. They're low growing, and so they've still got that beautiful view from their home, and they're not contributing the erosion that they used to into the lake. So that one was a definite success story and an easy step for them to take. There are lots of benefits to native plants in our shorelines besides just this nutrient component. They support the biodiversity that can be enjoyable to watch. They do reduce ice damage, similar reason. They're holding that soil in place, and so winter erosion issues become less of an issue. Same with boat wake erosion issues become less of an issue. They also are adapted to this area, so they don't need fertilizer. As I mentioned earlier, fertilizer is part of the issue in many places. Some ways to protect shorelands. Part of it is just conversations with neighbors. Many people don't know that what they do on their own properties affects the water quality. And so an education can be an important component of this. Land conservation. You guys are lucky to have a couple of very active land trusts in the area and to have, SELT's wonderful conserved properties, for example. And some good forested areas in the watershed. One thing that came up in the watershed plan that I believe SELT already knows about is, for example, getting logged areas reforested so that there's less input from the broader watershed. Another thing to do in terms of shoreline protection is we see a lot of municipalities that choose to implement additional regulations on shoreland areas beyond what's required at the statewide level of things like septic maintenance and requiring periodic septic maintenance for lakeshore properties. Those shoreland buffer zones are one of the tools in the toolbox to protect our shorelands. The state is also very reliant on local building officers and local officials to enforce Shoreland Act development permits. And so educating your building officers, having a strong relationship between the town and lake stakeholders is really invaluable. And the last thing on shorelands, there are always bills in Concord every year that have to do with shoreland protection. And therefore about water quality. And so having the local voice, come to Concord is a really important part of the process to hear from people about both the impacts of those bills on sort of day-to-day life as a homeowner, but also impacts to water quality and the reasons that would matter to you as a community. So number 2, protect shorelands. Number 3, upgrade and maintain septic systems. So a properly functioning septic system, there's separation between your leach field and groundwater, and the leach field has enough space that the wastewater isn't making its way off the property untreated and into adjacent surface water. What we see in New Hampshire is that we still have a lot of old camps, for example, that may have since been upgraded and people didn't think about the septic system component of that. We still have a lot of properties with holding tanks. We have a lot of properties with septic systems that haven't been pumped in over 25 years. The state's recommendation is to inspect and pump every 3 years so that you keep your system properly functioning. And that protects both water quality and public health because there can be, bacteria issues and so forth from non-functioning systems. The watershed plan found that septic systems at Sunrise Lake contribute 22% of the phosphorus load coming into Sunrise Lake. This is an issue. That means this is an issue. it means you are not going to be able to achieve your goals to reduce cyanobacteria blooms without addressing this septic component in some way. So, education is always the first step. We had a great success story up on Lake Winona where a VLAP volunteer was out taking water quality samples from a tributary and that was right next to someone's property. Property owner came down to say, hey, what you doing? They got talking about septic systems because there were always bacteria issues at that tributary. The property owner said, I've owned this property 30 years. I had no idea. I've never had my systems pumped or inspected. They got it inspected that year. They found that it was in failure. It was not a modern septic system. They replaced it this spring. And lo and behold, they have lower bacteria counts this year. So education is a good first step of this. Collaboration, we see some lake associations that partner with a local septic service and get a bunch of people around the lake signed up to have their septic systems on the same day, and sometimes haulers are willing to give essentially a group discount to go through and do a bunch of properties on the same day. Some cost savings there. Local regulations, Town of Sunapee, for example, just passed a town-wide ordinance requiring that residents inspect and pump their septic systems. I think it was every 3 years, and notify the town of that completion. Chesterfield has a similar local regulation that applies just around Spofford Lake, around properties within 500 feet of the lake. And this was because the development predated modern septic systems. They've found a lot of holding tanks, and they're starting to see improvement in their water quality. So septic system is number 3. Education and outreach. I mentioned this. A lot of people just have no idea that what they do on their property is affecting the resource that they love. And so spreading the word with your neighbors. There are a number of resources and fact sheets here. Feel free to take them. Feel free to spread the word, including about cyanobacteria blooms and how to identify and report them. One thing that came up in the watershed plan was this idea of forming a watershed association. So I know there are multiple lake associations around the lake that are serving the functions that they were created for. We find that watershed associations are a really powerful tool for sort of coordinating these actions that deal with water quality, spreading the word, applying for funding to support local work to do this. That could include everything from the town's work to reimbursing homeowners who are doing septic work. And they can be a lot of fun too. I've gone to some annual meetings that have been of lake associations, watershed associations that are just a giant party and a whole lot of fun in addition to being productive. So a good point for discussion here of if that would be a fit for this community. Generally, we find that it is a useful way to organize. And number 6, we keep talking about this watershed plan. What is a watershed plan? A watershed plan goes through the whole watershed where the water ends up in the lake and looks at all the sources of nutrients and quantifies them. So it becomes a prioritized to-do list, essentially. It says, here's where you can get the bang for your buck. If you do, it also tells you things like, do you have one big source of pollution or lots of small sources of pollution? Those are very different fixes. And so it's a very helpful tool. You've already gone through the painful process of creating a watershed plan. So you have this in place, and now it's up to implementation. The state does have grant and loan funds available for implementation. To get those funds, we do require having a plan in place already. So you, at this point, do qualify for those funds. I've been working with John and with the Regional Planning Commission to put together a hopefully successful funding application for this coming cycle of funding. The watershed plan for Sunrise Lake, again, to reduce the likelihood of cyano blooms would require reducing phosphorus inputs by 20%. And remember why we're doing this. I know this was a whole lot of detail stuff. Less nutrient pollution means a lower likelihood of future cyanobacteria blooms. And that in turn protects the water quality we enjoy and things like property values. I'm going to talk briefly about resources for homeowners. So homeowners can do very similar list of things to what I've just described. Avoid using fertilizer, vegetate your shoreline, prevent erosion, maintain your septic system. The state recommends to pump once every 3 years, but some of that depends on how many people you've got in your home, your size system, et cetera, and spreading the word. So we see a homeowner, things to look for. We saw a homeowner that, for instance, had this area where she's done a nice job with a nice vegetated shoreline, but her path down to the lake was clearly a place where every storm, the soil was just washing directly into the lake. So she worked with a state program I'll mention in a moment to put in gravel steps where instead of that soil coming down into the lake, those steps on the right infiltrate, rainwater comes down, it's designed for that water to infiltrate instead of sort of washing out the slope into the lake. 2 resources for homeowners. The first is through New Hampshire Lakes. It's called the Lake Smart program. This is a free, voluntary, non-regulatory program. There is no affiliation with the state. It's just an awesome program. They do not share your information. A qualified professional will come out to your property at your invitation and walk through the property with you and identify everything you're doing well to protect water quality and everything that you could do better. And at the end of that, you'll get a written report that describes all of those things. Homeowners who are already doing a lot well will be recognized with what's called the Lake Smart Award. Homeowners who have some work to do, shall we say, that list of things you could do better, again, is entirely voluntary. It's up to you to decide which of those, if any, you would like to change or implement. So, free program, awesome resource, the Lake Smart program through New Hampshire Lakes. The second program that I'll mention is Soak Up the Rain. This is a state program. It is also a free voluntary program. We have had several properties around Sunrise Lake go through the SOAK program. SOAK focuses very specifically on stormwater, whereas Lake Smart will look at sort of everything that could impact water quality. SOAK will give you technical assistance on DIY projects that you can do to improve and protect water quality. So the steps on the previous slide were an example of one done elsewhere. It's a good program. So, and Lisa has said that, Lisa runs the SOAK program. Lisa has said she would be happy to come back out to properties around Sunrise if there's interest. So last bit I'll say is this is a really complex issue. And, because cyanobacteria blooms reflect, frankly, decades of land use and are so twined with how we choose to use land, there isn't a fast, easy, cheap solution that's effective. And so the legislature sort of recognized that this is an expanding issue in New Hampshire, both because of nutrient issues and because of warming water temperatures in New Hampshire. And they charged the state with coming up with a statewide plan to address cyanobacteria blooms. We are in the process of drafting that plan now. We will have a final version publicly available by November 1st of this year. It's going to talk about a lot of the same things as what I've talked about, just from sort of more of a statewide level. It's also going to be talking about the need to get more funding to local organizations and municipalities to be dealing with the types of fixes that I've described. So the legislature requested that we come up with this plan, and we are hopeful that the legislature will be receptive to sort of what the science says we need to do to fix this. It is a very complex issue. And I'm sorry that your lake is dealing with it. I would be happy to take as many questions as you want. I'll leave my contact information up, as well as the links for how to report a bloom and that healthy swimming mapper that I mentioned that shows the current advisories statewide. So we've got a wonderful microphone volunteer, and then we'll.
Can I say, well, go ahead, get your question.
When you had your list of things that residents can do, one of them that doesn't appear if there's non-phosphate detergents and anything that you would use, because that goes with a septic system.
Yep.
The other thing is to bag all your grass if you're mowing the grass, because we on the, I don't know if you want to call it the south side, the west side of the lake, end up with an awful lot of, okay, that doesn't help any. I'll try it again. With grass in the cove. And among other things that appear in the cove, and it comes across to us. So there's a lot of people, you're not testing our water according to your red dots there, but we do notice different things that's there, and to put the permeable gravel in, and that has cut down tremendously as we've watched over the past 10 years going into the lake from our property.
Yes, so bagging grass and non-phosphate detergents, yes.
Yeah. Before we take the next question, I do want to, Nisa mentioned about septic systems and what you could do in terms of getting a septic service to try to help out. So Christine Maynard did a lot of work in arranging a particular program, I guess, and you want to go over with her and you want to explain what that is.
Excuse me.
Basically, it's a little discount from septic system servers, pumpers, if you will, to help pump your system. So go ahead, Christine.
I reached out to two of the local septic companies. One was Cameron's, the other is LaPierre. Both of them are willing to give a small discount, is anywhere from $15 to $20 off the price. Cameron's did say if they're able to come out and fill up one of their trucks, which is about a 5,000-gallon truck, that they could potentially take off more of a cost. I know LaPierre was looking to do it possibly like mid-September, around the 15th. I did post it on the Sunrise Lakelands Association Facebook page. If people are interested, you can just call them and let them know that you're a part of the Sunrise Lake discount, and they have it noted, and then you can set it up with them. I'm hoping that if enough people volunteer, sign up and do it, we can potentially make it a yearly thing, so everyone can jump on, and we can help local business and help our lake, and maybe get a little discount at the same time. So if anyone has any other questions about it, you can either message me or come see me.
I have a quick question.
Okay, wait a minute. Here, take them. That's okay. That's so we can get it on, so you're on film.
Yeah, my quick question is, it's not so much what the discount is what's the final cost. So if somebody gives a $15 discount, but it's still $50 more than somebody else's pumping, what is the cost?
I don't have the price for Cameron's. I did list the cost for.
I'm pretty sure if they pump out the tank, they pump out the tank. So what I'm looking for is,
Yeah, so
what's the dollar amount?
So I have the dollar amount listed for LaPierre on my page. I can pull it up and show you what the cost is.
Between 250 and 350.
Yeah, it's pretty reasonable, and I know Cameron's is relatively close to around the same. I mean, by all means, if people can find somebody that's at a different cost and they want to go with them. Oh, thank you.
Oh, that was quick.
So for, this is for the cost for LaPierre. So for a 300 to 500 gallon tank, it's $225. For a 750 to 1,000 gallon tank, it's $275. For a 1,250 gallon tank, it's $325. 1,500 gallons or more, it's $400.
Thank you very much.
Who's next?
Either of these two.
Hi, Steve Bartell, 289 Pinkham Road. This has been great, first of all. Thank you very much for organizing it, and this is great information. I really appreciate it very much. One just quick question. How concerning is the logging that's happening on Pinkham Road and the potential development to some of the points that you made in terms of, reducing all of the trees lost and what might start going into the rivers and streams in our watershed area?
Well, being on the planning board, that particular, both sides of the property, both properties on either side, were logged, pretty intensive logging. Property owner has to go through approval from forestry, has to go through approval with DES on wetlands. They also have to do soil tests and that kind of stuff. I was asked the owner of the properties, particularly the one on this side, what is that, north side, west side, I don't know what side it is because I live down there, has to do a report, a soils test in terms of drainage and so forth and so on, which he has and which he gave to the planning board. And we were supposed to put it up online, but apparently it's up on the website. It's not. It's a report from the scientist on the drainage and so forth and so on. So I will make sure that's up as quick as possible. As far as the drainage is concerned, I'm not a scientist on how that works. I personally did have the forest ranger come out and look at that property, make sure that it was being logged properly. There are certain best management practices when you log. There's no slash and burn allowed. You have to have a 50-foot or 100-foot buffer with a 50-foot buffer on a road. You have to have a 100-foot buffer, I think, on a stream, depending on the size of the stream. Is that right, Kate? So, yes, when you take down some trees, it certainly will affect the water flow, but there's a lot of vegetation still left. You notice most of the trees that were taken down. It looks awful now. It's not like we're going down a tunnel anymore. And my wife said this morning, oh boy, when it snows, it's going to be a little different on Pinkham. Go ahead.
I'll add to that a little bit. Two things. One, reforesting logged areas is one of the things that is mentioned in the watershed plan. The other thing is the watershed plan did include what's called a build-out analysis that looked at, I forget what the time frame is, but basically how much development is likely to occur in this area over the next X number of years, and how does that relate to how much other work we need to do to meet these water quality goals. And I apologize, I don't remember the specifics offhand, but that it doesn't speak to that specific project, but that sort of general concept that you're going to keep building realistically was part of what was considered.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question for Nisa.
Go ahead.
First, thank you. Excellent presentation. I live on Nicola Road. Are there currently prohibitions against fertilizing within a certain distance of the lake?
There is. So it's in state law that you are not allowed to apply any form of fertilizer within, I believe it's 25 feet of the lake. And that there are restrictions on only slow release phosphorus-free fertilizers between 25 feet and
50.
25 feet and some other distance
50?
that I'm blanking on right now. I can follow up.
50, I think.
I think it's 50 as well, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
And the Shoreline Protection Act has
In the
some as well.
That is all in the Shoreline Protection Act, yes.
We're experiencing extreme beach erosion, and it's not from runoff, it's from boat wakes.
Okay.
As a homeowner, is there anything I can do? Will swim floats or something block it? I mean, the jet skis are just tearing it up. I've lost real estate
Yeah.
on my side.
I can,
You are far from alone in that issue.
yeah. Okay, I live on the water also. I don't know if I get erosion, but I get waves. Remember, state law says 150 foot. No width. Okay. As any law regulation is that we put forth is only as good as it's enforced. Marine Patrol is only here. How many times a year is Marine Patrol here? Maybe. They were here just last Sunday, I think, or Saturday. Well, that's the same thing. Same thing. Fish and Game, Marine Patrol. They can do the same. There is a Marine Patrol guy that comes. Fish and Game does get here, but that's a matter of enforcement. I would say, if you have a complaint that's particularly over in Nicola, and the Nicola is notorious because it's very smooth, flat water over there. See, and people go zippity-doo-dah by there, zim right by there. 150 foot is a long way. Okay. Now, before our road agent has a comment about drainage and did you, Dan? Yes. Okay.
If we put out those floats, like put to contain the swimming,
Wait a minute.
will that stop the wave?
No, just a second. Just a
Not
second.
really.
All right.
There's
Here you
not
go.
a great answer to this other than education.
Can you hear me now, Tim? Thank you. Good morning. My name's Dan Phillips, Phillips. I am the road agent, and I am also a resident, live over on Nicola. What I want to specifically talk about is where the runoff goes. I know you guys are all concerned about the logging on Pinkham. None of the runoff on Pinkham goes to the lake. All that runoff goes back down under 153 and heads towards Milton. So as far as the logging over there goes, none of the runoff goes over there. We are going to be replacing culverts over there, which you all are aware of. That's coming up shortly. Most of our runoff comes from up in the Drew area, which is part of Mount Jesse. So all that comes down off the big hill, crosses New Durham Road, goes out into what they call Tanglewood, which is a big swamp, which is nice that it slows that down and that swamp filters things. And then you have the majority of it comes in, and that also feeds right here off of New Durham Road, feeds the Pinkham side, which we're calling the Pinkham Brook, and then Tanglewood as well. So one thing that I have noticed this year, and it's a question for Nisa, is I've lived up here for 4 years. I've been the road agent for 2 years. And this is the first time that I've seen the ditch lines and the brooks that feed all of this with that slimy, colored material.
The foam.
In, not even the foam, it's like that, the algae looking stuff.
The iron bacteria?
And more than that. I just replaced the culvert down here on Ridge Road, and there's that bluish green that was not there earlier. we replaced that culvert. I happened to get sick the next week. I was in the water and all that. And my question is, we do test the lake. Do we ever test any of the tributaries that go into the lake?
Yeah.
Before the lake?
Yes.
Do we test for bacterias that would be present in some of the tributaries, like the main parts that feed the lake?
I can answer that. In the past, we have, but not always. So we are now testing right at the culverts, not where they come out in the water, because that's where the nutrients should be coming from. We could also test before that, before they cross the road, but we test the accessibility. But we test Tanglewood and Pinkham Road, we test them at the culverts. We don't test them at the outlets.
Yeah.
And we're doing that more consistently.
So,
We also, so two things. One, we do have a state program that monitors our rivers, which would look at more upstream areas than the culverts by the lake. The other thing to note is a lot of people think cyanobacteria and think it's just a lake issue. It does also grow in rivers. It's rarer because it requires pretty stagnant water, but it is, you see some of those stagnant areas that you would be in, yeah.
so it's been an exceptionally wet spring and summer.
Yeah.
And then I have noticed that the last rain that we've got, just a couple of days or even the other night, has kind of washed some of that away. Now, like I said, I pay attention to ditches, culverts, and stuff like that. And like I said, I've only been up here for 4 years, but this is the first year that I've noticed that we have that type of, and I know some of it's due to iron and runoff and all that stuff. I understand that. But like I said, it's a physical difference, noticeable difference riding down the road that you can see that stuff. And that is ahead of the lake.
Yeah.
And that's
and
my comment.
We have broken records this year in terms of how many blooms we're seeing. And if you see it someplace like that, do report it to us because we will spread the word.
So,
I think that was an excellent question. I was a member of a stormwater committee in the other house that I have. And feeders that come into the town or into locations are extremely important. So if we're testing it, does the data show anything that is a measurable increase in any of the feeders? That was a question for like anybody. If you're measuring the feeder streams, you said you're measuring the feeder streams.
Yes.
Has it shown any marked increase in cyanobacteria or anything else going into the lake?
We've been doing that for a couple years now, maybe 2 or 3 years consistently because the VLAP people said you should be doing it, and I double checked to make sure we were doing it right, right at the culvert. So I'm pretty sure that we did them at the culverts most of the time.
Do we have any data on that?
Well, the data would be, we don't have data that says, okay, on June 23rd, 2021, we went to this culvert, but we went to no, we don't have that detailed information.
So is it really hard to do these measurements? Does it take a lot of equipment? And
No.
support?
It's a bottle and acid.
Oh, good. So if you observe something like you observe, then I would immediately go and measure it and see what I'm dealing with. That's my comment.
Well, would you like to join the VLAP volunteer committee?
We'll be talking later.
Okay.
There's a question over here.
That's the ditch at Lakeshore.
yes.
Okay.
There's a question.
Okay, there you go.
Hi, David Miller, 56 Shore Drive, and my wife Christine. Her family and us have been here over 50 years on Sunrise Lake and are very concerned and think this meeting has been terrific today in moving forward. We were also a small success story because our old septic system failed in the last year or so, and we found the need to replace it and moved forward to doing that because we believe that is an investment in the lake and an investment in our own home going forward. So we really applaud the efforts of John and Randy and Nina, yourself and others But I wanted to also comment on my day job. I've been in environmental conservation for 40 years. I'm the Adirondack Council Clean Water Program Coordinator for the Adirondack Park. I've been involved in the development of the New York State HAB Action Plan. I've written papers on septic system pollution in the Adirondacks. Watch what you write about, it may come home. And I've been involved in water quality and septic inspection programs at municipal levels and on Lake George. The action plan, management plan you have is a huge benefit to Sunrise Lake. Most small lakes don't have a management plan and did not have the foresight to develop something like that. And the answers for us are right in that plan. And so one of the things I'd like to propose, whether it's increasing septic inspections, whether it's in broadening the buffers for fertilizer use or not using fertilizer, whether it's replacing culverts or redirecting stormwater that's coming down hill areas that's causing this, or other mitigation measures, is that mainly falls under the town to work with a lake association, and I'm on the Hampshire Shore Lake Association board, to implement and get funds and move forward with. So I'd like to propose that the Conservation Commission, and I'm involved in New York on my own Clifton Park Conservation Program, develop an advisory group beyond their own members with expertise or ad hoc members that can help implement this plan. An advisory group that can work in consort, because not all of us are here year-round, but with technology can help add to the solution. So I'd be willing to join such an effort with my expertise, and I'm sure others would with their interest, to move this forward so we can, beyond this meeting, have a real action plan to work with the Conservation Commission, the town board, the planning board, to implement all these good things in your management plan. Thanks.
Thank you. For those who are interested, over on our watershed display over there is a sign-up sheet. If you're interested, please do so. We would appreciate it. Another question? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Nisa. It seems as though, most people want to have a nice green lawn. Is there, or would you suggest an organic way for people to use some fertilizer? Is there an organic fertilizer that you guys would recommend that would give the green lawn but not hurt the lake?
Yeah, so so if a fertilizer is effective at promoting plant growth on land, it's going to be effective at promoting plant growth in the lake. And so there are other benefits to organic fertilizer, but from a nutrient delivery perspective, organic fertilizer still has nutrients in it.
So essentially no fertilizer.
That is the best for the lake. There are slow release fertilizers that you can apply beyond that 25-foot buffer, and there are, which helps because it's not, with slower release, there's less immediately available to wash into the lake in any one rainstorm. There's also phosphorus-free fertilizers. Nitrogen also contributes to cyano blooms, but to a lesser degree. And I was going to make a third point.
Could I just say lime in the spring, because acidity is so important? The grass grow is critically important, is an option, and so lime and pH value of your soil is an important element, and it's very easy to over-fertilize. Fertilizer is a marketing Scott's tool, I'll tell you right now. Most lawns don't need the amount of fertilizer, especially if in the early runs your cuttings are acting as fertilizer, maybe in the first cut or things of that sort to absorb in. You don't need all this stuff you're putting on the lawn. Lime will do great, I swear.
Yeah, and that.
Wait a minute.
Add clover to your lawn.
Yeah.
Pulls natural nitrogen into your lawn.
Yep, I have clover on my lawn, and it's super easy maintenance, and it's green, it's easy to play in, and the over-fertilization was the third point of most people over-apply, don't over-apply.
Do you think the 25-foot rule should be for
because everything does flow downhill. So whether you're at 25 feet or
Can I answer that one?
John is better positioned than a state employee to answer legislative questions.
Well, no. There are two answers to that. The hard one is legislative.
John, what was the question?
Okay, I'm sorry. The question is, can you extend the 25-foot no man's zone deeper? And the answer to that is, the hardest one is legislative. The easiest one is your own community. There are communities that have pretty big buffer zones where you can't put anything. Some are 100 feet. Other states, they're deeper.
There are places where it's 250 feet,
250.
500 feet.
You can't put any fertilizer, and that's it. That's a community decision.
The other thing
That's a hard one too. That's not easy. I have a lawn too. And do I fertilize it? No. But I put lime on it. I'll do that.
The other thing I'll add to that is education is a big piece of it too. I mean, this is in state law. We know that people aren't following state law, but a lot of people are receptive to learning about alternatives, clover, applying less, and so forth.
Yeah. In terms of, you hit a good point. In terms of education, that's part of the function of our management plan. And we hope, when I say we, a collective group, going to try to do more education with the public, more of these meetings. I'm trying to set one up. I know a lot of you will be gone, probably, but I'm trying to set one up for the 23rd of September. That's not cast in concrete, but I'm hoping to get, well, I know I have, New Hampshire Lakes come in and talk about certain subjects. What do you do in the lake in the winter? Maybe some of you don't care, but things like that. And then in the spring, education on stormwater runoff, other issues that come up. We're going to try to have these meetings as an educational outreach type of scenario. So we hope you give us support and help to put these things together. Okay. Any other questions? Question over here. Okay.
I'm Janine Cowell. I'm somewhat new to the lake, only been here about a year and a half over on Shore Drive. So I have a few kind of probably simple questions. The cyanobacteria we saw on our beach. I was curious if it's something you can always see if it's in the lake, or is there a chance that you have an issue that you can't see? The other thing is we're seeing some white foam, especially on the active days. Is that a concern? And no one has mentioned the snails. I understand 2 years ago the snails were really bad, but they're picking up again this year. And is this related to the cyanobacteria issue and the bacteria, or is there something else? And is there anything we can do about the snails?
Sounds good. All right, so cyanobacteria when you can't see it. Cyanobacteria are always present in all of our water bodies in New Hampshire. They're a natural part of the ecosystem. When they're at those low levels, when you can't see them, they are usually not producing toxins to a level that harms human or animal health. So if you can't see it, it's probably safe. It's when they take off and form those blooms that you can see that toxin production is likely to occur, or is much more likely to occur, and therefore pose risk to human health. So toxins do persist for a little while after a bloom. That's complicated and messy, and the basic answer is if you see it, stay out. If there's an advisory anywhere on your lake, stay out because it does move around the lake quite rapidly. If you can't see it, you're probably fine.
Can you expound on the differences between advisory, alert?
Yes, can I get through her
Yes,
three
go
before
ahead.
I forget the
Because
three?
I'm sorry.
All right. 2, snails. The snails are smelly and they reproduce like crazy, and unfortunately, there's not an effective treatment for them at this point in time. They're also in a weird loophole in state law where nobody at the state has actually been charged to be tracking them in any way.
Invasive species.
They do not pose an ecological risk to the health of the lake. there's not much we can do about them. You know, if you see them and feel like pull them out, sure.
Wait a minute.
Those snails live for 5 years. They give live birth to approximately 50 babies each year. So every time you see a snail, take it out. Every snail you take out, you're saving 200 other snails from being born.
Yeah, and then you had a third question around the foam. There's a lot of foam this year because of the storms. It's related to churning of bacteria in the water. It is not directly harmful. Don't go like scoop it up and eat it. John asked about cyanobacteria alerts versus advisories or warnings. So the state has a two-tiered response to cyanobacteria blooms. When a bloom is present and reported, we come out and take a sample, we take it back to Concord and look at it under a microscope. If there are more than 70,000 cyanobacteria cells per milliliter, we issue an advisory or a warning. Those two are the same thing. We're changing our language right now. And that's when there's a high likelihood of a public health threat. If there is fewer than 70,000 cyanobacteria cells per milliliter, the data from the World Health Organization and EPA say that there's not a high likelihood of a public health threat. Some individuals are sensitive to the cell walls themselves and will react at lower concentrations. When it's at those lower concentrations, we issue an alert. An alert is a lower level, sort of pay attention. It's something going on and it might be more likely that a bloom will emerge, but it's not a formal recommendation to stay out.
So, just a clarification, because there has been some confusion when the state issues an advisory and the health officer posts that and we post it on that there's an advisory. Everybody thinks the lake is closed. It is not.
It is not. So the state does not have the authority to close your lake. This is a risk statement from DES. So when a warning is in place, we are saying we think that there's a high likelihood of a threat to public health. My boss likes to compare this to sharks. Some people are fine surfing in the waves right next to sharks. Some people run far away and won't even sun themselves on the beach, right? Everybody has a different risk tolerance. If you choose to swim when the water is bright green, that's your risk choice. When there is a warning, the beach is not closed. It is simply the state saying, we think there's a risk to public health here.
Right. Okay. Yes, Carl. Oh.
Hi, everybody. I'm the health officer and the building inspector for the town. They talked a little bit about the shoreland permits. If you're within 250 feet of the water, shoreland permits are needed. Because if you're doing any disruption of soil, if you're building your house, if you're moving a wall, anything you do can move water, can move soil, can move bacteria. So it's really easy. Go online, there's a questionnaire. They'll ask you some questions. It might be a small fee, it might be a big fee, who knows, depending on what you're doing. And that's an important part of this whole process for moving water if you're near the shore. And it's something as simple as, I'm removing my driveway and changing it to aggregate. Well, that changes things, so you need to ask them first to see whether or not that influences the watershed. And that's available right online. You can look it up on the DES website for the shoreline permit. If you have issues with water in your yard, it's accumulating at the end of your driveways, and you're wondering how you're going to fix this. That's what the highway department is specializing in, and that's why he knows where everything is. So if you need to know where your culvert's supposed to go, where you're looking to put in a culvert because you're just doing a driveway, you would ask Dan. He would tell you what you should have And if you're getting a driveway, you're supposed to pay for a driveway permit. And that's where that's funded, for Dan to come look at these things. A lot of times around the lake, people think, oh, I'm just stripping some soil, or I'm just tearing down my garage and replacing it, and I don't have to do anything. That's not true at all. You are supposed to check with the state. They will tell you what you can and can't do, how to do it, and you might end up with a better product for your own lawn too, because people go and do their own landscaping without a permit, and then find, hey, it just eroded all the way into the lake, and now all my money just got wasted, and all I had to do was get a cheap permit, possibly, at that point. But again, I'm also the health officer, so if you ever have any questions, send them to my email or call me, and I can answer as much as I can. But this year's been difficult because it's been hundreds of questions about this. So I do the best I can, but it's too much for one person.
I'll have some of my business cards over on that table as well, and if you do have questions or whatever, feel free to reach out as well. You know, trying to all help each other out, because it is a high volume of questions.
For those not here, I can speak loud. For those not here, how do they see the video from today?
Okay, the video
I
is.
want to tell people that weren't here also.
Well, we've been passing the word around. Tim, what did you tell me this morning? It's going to be put online pretty quick, right? Yeah.
Can you go to the town website?
It'll be on the YouTube. They have a YouTube link on the town website. Is that right?
Right now it's on Facebook, and what we're going to be doing is put it on YouTube as well.
So you go to the town Facebook page?
No.
Or you go to the town website?
So right now, it's not on the town website right now. It's going to be going up as soon as we can get it up there.
Okay, so I can tell people to go there.
Yeah.
Okay. Question from Christine. Yes, just a second. Thanks, Dan.
I know there's not particularly on my side of the lake, but on other sides of the lake, there's a lot of people complaining about geese and all. But then on my side, there's a lot of people with chickens and ducks and such. How much of an effect does that have on the lake and the quality of water?
Yeah, so it is measurable. If I remember right, it's about 2% of the phosphorus at Sunrise Lake. It's in the watershed plan. I'm not 100% sure on my memory of that number. For geese management, we look specifically at geese and not at chickens and ducks. Chickens and ducks tend to, they poop a lot less, and they tend to not poop right by the water. There are things you can do to manage to minimize geese use of lawns near water, for example, or little beach areas or so forth.
Or dams.
There's a list of those in the watershed plan. That's where I'd refer people to. We also have a fact sheet on geese management by lakes. I would be happy to share that with you to share with others. It's sort of a 1 to 2 page, both what is the problem and what can we do about it. People put up, geese fencing. There's a variety of things homeowners can do to minimize geese use of their land. Geese also carry a parasite called swimmer's itch. And so there are other reasons beyond nutrients to minimize geese use of your land as well.
I will make a good point about resources. Whoa! There are 2 sites that I use besides Google, I guess, to gather a lot of information that I put out sometimes with people, and I'll tell you that once you learn to navigate around DES, there's a tremendous amount, particularly in the water section. That's where you really want to go. There's a lot of information, a lot of bulletins that are available about every subject known to man. Nisa brought some bulletins on cyanobacteria, phosphorus. Those, you can just go online and get those. The other resource that I use, believe it or not, and sometimes it's duplicate, is New Hampshire Lakes. They have a lot of information on there also, and they do work in cooperation with DES, and they do great work for works. So those are resources that you can certainly access at any time. And I Google DES. The New Hampshire lakes are my resources for information. So anybody got?
I agree that DES's website is quite a challenge. So if there's a topic you want to know more about, frankly, save your time and just drop me a note and I'll send you the link to
Yeah,
a
it's an
specific
education to
resource
maneuver
because
around there.
It is awful. So I'm putting business cards over here for anyone interested.
All right, any other questions? Yes.
No. Need that. I'm just going to ask you a question.
Okay, the question is,
Okay. Usually, you and Randy are in our conservation group. At the beginning of the group, we usually select, do the flag. I would like to do it at the end of the meeting, but it's up to you.
that's fine. To be honest with you, didn't even think about it, and I apologize if I offended anybody by not doing that, but we certainly can do that before we dismiss. So we will do that, yes. Any other questions, comments? If not, we do look forward, all of us, to get together again and continue the conversation. If you haven't looked at the watershed material we have up there, please do so. Randy and I can be reached at any time. We can help, we can, and we hope to move forward with what we've learned today. So on behalf of our chairman here of the Conservation Commission, can we all stand and pledge the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I thank you very much for that. And Carol, thank you for bringing that up.
And there's still refreshments.
There's plenty of refreshments, so please go. Thank you.
I'm Glenn Thorne. I live on Fox Road.
Oh, hi, Glenn. How are you? Nice to meet you.